Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Chief Chat. What is up, my exchange family from all over the world, and thank you for tuning in to another episode of Chief Chat. My name is Chief Master Sergeant Kevin Osby, and I'm your Senior Enlisted Advisor for the Army and Air Force Exchange Service. Before we get started with our guest today, I would like to introduce my lovely co-hosts, Kiana Holloman and Dora Trillo. How y'all doing, ladies?
Hi, Chief.
Hi.
Hi, Kiana.
How's everything going in Dallas?
Oh, so much better. It's brighter today. Definitely.
Yeah, I'm reporting live from Colorado Springs, Colorado. Just want to give a shout out to the folks here at Fort Carson for hosting me, doing site visits. Nobody told me how dry it was here in Colorado Springs, so I needed to bring some like extra strength lotion, and I think I forgot it. So I'll buy some at the PX though.
Okay.
But if you're a sports enthusiast like myself, you're way too familiar with our next guest. But I didn't realize prior to booking this interview that he's been inspiring the world with his novels for many years. So without further ado, Kiana, please introduce our next guest.
Joining us today is a best-selling author, sports journalist, and talk show host. He is widely known for his international bestseller, Tuesdays with Morrie, which has sold more than 17 million copies worldwide. Today, he joins us to discuss his new novel, The Stranger in the Lifeboat, available tax-free at shopmyexchange.com. Please give a warm Chief Chat welcome to Mitch Albom.
Hey.
Oh. Thank you. That's very kind. Nice to be with you.
Absolutely. So, Mitch, man, it's an honor to have you with us today. We really appreciate you spending a little time with us on the show. Can you let our viewers know where you're coming to us from?
Right now I'm in Laguna Beach, California. That's not where I live. I live in Detroit, but I came out here for the Super Bowl, which is Sunday, and I've gone to the last 35 Super Bowls anyhow as a sports writer, a commentator, so it's not really new. But this year especially, I wanted to come out because having lived in Detroit all my
Uh-oh.
Hi there.
So, yeah. I think Mitch got kicked off.
Oh, did I kick Mitch off?
Yeah, I think you kicked Mitch off.
All right, let me just.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, he must have clicked on. He must have accidentally kicked him off. We'll stand by until Mitch comes back on. So let's since he mentioned Super Bowl, who y'all sports fans? Who y'all got for the Super Bowl?
I'm
rooting
out.
for the Rams.
When the Cowboys were out, I was out. Sorry. I'm Dallas all the way. But I'll be watching.
So why the Rams for you, Kiana?
I love California. I love LA. It's not my team, but I'm going to root for someone. It's going to be the Rams. So.
Gotcha.
Oh.
Well, I'm a LSU enthusiast, and I got Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase, and so I got to go for the Bengals. Even though I'm a Cowboy fan, I'm with you, Dora. When the Cowboys, but for some reason I'm used to the Cowboys leaving at some point before the Super Bowl, so it hurts my heart to say that.
It is sad to admit.
Gotcha. So hopefully Mitch will be joining us here in a second. Yes. For him to be going to the last 38 Super Bowls, man, that's a lot of Super Bowls to go to.
A lot of Super Bowls. And that is one thing I did not know about. I know you know him from his sports journalism, and that's one of the questions. Oh, there we go.
Hey, what's going on, Mitch? How you doing? I think you're on mute. No? Can you hear us? Yeah, I'm not. Yep.
Hold on.
Yeah. What we'll do, we'll try to have you come back in, and I think he froze. I think he's trying to come back in. The beauty of live television, you guys. This is what we do.
Oh,
Is it any better now? Any better
There we
now?
go.
yes, we
Yes.
hear you.
You know, I've heard rumors of military equipment failing in the middle of an operation, but I didn't know it came down to this level here. I promise you, I wasn't saying anything controversial. I was just telling you why I was out here, and I think I froze in the middle. But to quickly answer the question you asked me, I'm here in California, not because I live here. I live in Detroit, but I'm going to the Super Bowl on Sunday because having been a Detroit sports writer for the last 30 whatever years, I realized we're never going to the Super Bowl. And so since the quarterback that we used to have now plays for the Rams, and in 1 year, after 12 years of never winning a playoff game in Detroit, in 1 year he went to the Super Bowl. I'm going to come out and watch him, and then if he wins, everyone in Detroit is going to count it as our Super Bowl, and so I will be there to witness.
Well, Mitch, I can tell you that the military budget, if you know anything about the military budget, it's the defense budget doesn't invest a lot in IT. So we definitely got to get better in that. But
That's true. Yeah. Okay.
But I'm assuming you're going for the Rams.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm going for Matthew Stafford to win. I know him well. He's worked with us on our charities in Detroit. I did a radio thing with him for 12 years. And so, yeah, you root at this stage. People always ask for sports writers, do you root for a particular team? And I always say, no, you root for guys. You root for people that who you like, more so than you root for teams. And I know him and I like him, so I hope he wins.
Yeah, and we were talking about it when you got kicked off. We started talking about Super Bowl and who we thought would win. And so Kiana's on your side. She's cheering for the Rams. Not for any reason that you said, but just because she likes LA. and I'm a LSU fan because I grew up in Louisiana, so
we know where you sit.
Yeah, absolutely. Even though OBJ is playing for the Rams, but I got to give to Joe Cool.
Yeah, and Jamar Chase too. So
Jamar Chase, absolutely.
Right. So your writing collection often inspires readers to appreciate life. And this is especially demonstrated in your international bestseller, Tuesdays with Morrie. So for those who aren't familiar, what sparked your idea to kind of leave the sports journalism world for a sec and write Tuesdays with Morrie? And how has that changed your life since its release?
Well, I like the way you asked that, leave the sports world for a sec, because that's kind of what I was planning to do, except I ended up sort of leaving permanently. It was really quite an accident, to be honest with you. I was 37 years old. I had not, up to that point, I was just a sports writer. I wrote sports books. I was on ESPN. I did sports programming. Everything in my life was sports. And that's really how I kind of intended it to be. But I happened to be watching television one night, and I saw the Nightline program with Ted Koppel, and he was interviewing an old professor of mine named Morrie Schwartz, who I had been very close with in college, and then had lost touch with as I had kind of pursued my own ambitions and, my own career. And he was someone who, was really like an uncle to me back in college. And I promised that I would stay in touch with, but I broke that promise for 16 years. Now, here he was on the Nightline program talking to Ted Koppel about what it was like to die. And I realized through this program that he had Lou Gehrig's disease and only had a few months left to live. And so feeling guilty, I went out to visit him, what I thought would be a one-time visit. And one turned to two, and two to three, and three to four, and they all turned into all the Tuesdays that he had left in his life. Still, I wasn't planning on writing a book. I was just getting this amazing education from this man who was dying and was able to say to me, this matters, this doesn't matter. You think this matters, but when you get to where I am, and you will, it's not going to matter. And it was just an amazing last class in what was important in life. And I found out that he was very in debt for his medical bills. He told me during one of our visits, and they didn't have enough money to pay them. And he was afraid that after he died, his family would have to sell their house and just to pay off all these medical bills. So I had the idea that maybe I could write a book to help him pay his bills. And that's all it was ever supposed to be. And I went out to different publishers in New York with the idea. And believe it or not, almost every publisher said, nah, boring, not interested, depressing. You're a sports writer. You can't write a book like that. And I probably would have given up if it wasn't for someone else. And, when you do things for someone else, you push a little bit harder than you do sometimes for yourself. And the military certainly knows that. That's kind of the backbone, principle behind people who serve in the military. And so I finally kept pushing. I found one publisher who was willing to do the book 3 weeks before Maury died. And they gave us just enough money to pay his bills. And I gave it all to Maury. And I said, here, at least, you don't have to worry about dying a second death, as he would call it. You can pay off your bills. And to me, I always felt that was kind of the end of Tuesdays with Maury, because I had finally learned to do one nice thing for this man who had done so many nice things for me. And I'd stopped thinking about my career and just did something to help somebody else. And it wasn't supposed to be a big book. They only printed 20,000 copies of it. And I thought I'd have them in the trunk of my car for the rest of my life and be giving them out to people. And funny thing happened. The book came out and people just started reading it and passed it on, and one passed to another and another and another. And now it's the biggest selling memoir in the history of publishing. And to finish your question, you said, how did it change my life? It changed my life in every way, because instead of now being the guy who people would stop in airports and say, hey, who's going to win the Super Bowl? And I would say, the Patriots, and I'd keep walking. Now, all of a sudden, they were stopping me and saying, well, my mother died of cancer, and the last thing we did was read your book together. Can I talk to you about her? And you can't go Patriots and keep walking. You have to stop and listen and listen and listen. And I have stopped and listened pretty much every day of my life since that book came out to someone tell me a story about someone that they lost, or someone who's sick, or something that they're going through, or the grieving, whatever. And you become sensitive to that when you hear so many stories like that, and your world starts to change. And mine started to move away from sports and into things that had more to do with the meaning of life, for want of a better phrase. And all my subsequent books, 9 books since then, even to the latest, The Stranger in Lifeboat, none of them have been about sports. They've all been about, these bigger picture things. So it was a left turn just like that.
Well, that's actually what my question was going to be, because as Kiana mentioned, Tuesdays with Maury was your breakout novel, and it just became such a big thing for everybody. And then, of course, you had your career in sports journalism before that, but you didn't stop there. You kind of went into a world of creative writing. So what kind of kept you going, or what was that transition like?
Well, Tuesdays with Maury, of course, wasn't a novel. It was nonfiction. So it was a true story. And I thought that I would just go back to sports writing. But once that book took off and then became this monster publishing thing, then I kind of froze, to be honest. I didn't know what I should do next. Everybody suddenly wanted me to write Wednesdays with Maury, and Thursdays and Chicken Soup with Maury, and Venus and Mars and Maury, any kind of derivative of the Maury franchise. And I didn't want to do that, because that wasn't the reason that I wrote that book. And I didn't think that was honest or proper. But by the same token, I knew that if I wrote another nonfiction book, everybody would compare it to Tuesdays with Maury and say, well, it's not Tuesdays with Maury. So I said, well, maybe I should just try fiction, try a novel. At least that'll be totally different. And of course, the same publishers who told me, no, we don't want Tuesdays with Maury, bad idea, and who are now saying, oh, we want Wednesdays with Maury, good idea. Then when they heard I said I wanted to write a novel, they said, bad idea, don't do that. That's a terrible mistake. People who write nonfiction should stay with nonfiction, and people who write fiction should stay with fiction. And I said, well, that's what you said about Tuesdays with Maury when I came to you the first time, so I'm not going to listen to you. And I wrote a little book called The 5 People You Meet in Heaven. And that was a novel. And that book, which, by the way, was inspired by my uncle who was in the military, and it was inspired by his experience in the military because he served in World War II, fought in Europe and fought in the Philippines. And when I was a kid, I used to say to him, Uncle Ed, and he was this barrel-chested kind of guy. He was like Popeye, he'd always wear those beater T-shirts. He would tuck them in at dinner time, so it was formal wear, like that. And he when we were kids, we used to get on his biceps, and he would lift us up like that. And I said to him when I was a kid, when you were in the war, did you ever kill anybody? And he said, I might have. And what he meant was there were many firefights that they had at night, and they were firing, and who knows where his bullets went. And I thought, what a thing to sort of carry around with you. Maybe you killed somebody, maybe you didn't, not to know. And so I created this story about this former soldier who dies when he's 83 years old, thinking he's a nobody, and goes to heaven and meets 5 people from his life who explain to him how he touched them in some little way and changed their life forever. And one of them is a little girl he encountered in the war. And so, actually, my very first novel had a lot of military stuff in it. And I leaned on my brother-in-law, who's been in the Navy for many, many, many years, and was a Navy pilot. And he had a lot of good help, and so did a lot of other people in my family. And that book became a big, big, big success. And so from that point, I was free to sort of write fiction or nonfiction, and I've just sort of stayed in that ever since.
Man, well, I'm glad you didn't listen to those publishers, and huge shout out to your uncle and your brother-in-law for their service to this country. I know it's awesome that they were able to inspire you, to write a novel that touches everybody, but it's based off it was kind of inspired from a military encounter. So your new book. Your new book, The Stranger in the Lifeboat, is released in November, and we've all read it and felt really deeply moved by the story, especially the growth of a few characters. So if you don't mind, we're going to play a trailer of the novel to share with our viewers right now before we go kind of start talking about the book.
Sure.
Okay. Well, let's go ahead and play the novel. Let's take a look at it. Or the trailer, I'm sorry.
How did the ship blow up? Are we the only ones left? How long can we survive in this lifeboat?
Look! There's someone in the water.
Pull him in! Who are you? Are you okay?
I don't recognize him.
He's probably in shock.
Well, whoever you are, thank the Lord we found you.
I am the Lord.
Man.
That about sets it up, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. It does. Now, Kiana's going to go in and kind of talk about the book a little bit.
Yeah, so the trailer revealed the major event that changed the lives of the characters, which is the boat explosion. And throughout the story, the reader takes the journey with those on the lifeboat, questioning if the stranger is actually the Lord. And while reading it, I even found myself questioning the stranger and his behavior at times. So what was the inspiration behind the stranger's character and the predicament that the characters found themselves in?
So when I write novels, I tend to try to come up with an idea that I want to explore more so than a plot. Once I have the idea, then I find a plot that suits it. And the idea that I wanted to write about was asking for help. Over the last couple of years with COVID and everything, a lot of us have asked for help. We've prayed for help. We've prayed, for our relatives to get better or our loved ones to get better. We prayed not to get sick or not to lose our job. And some of us have had our prayers answered and some have not. And it strikes me that, when we, especially as Americans, when we ask for help and we pray to God for help, we kind of want it like the next day. And when it doesn't come, we don't get better, the job was lost anyhow, the money doesn't come, whatever it is, we get kind of disappointed. And we think, well, that prayer wasn't answered or God's ignoring me. But then 5-10 years later, I see people who look back on things that happened. They say, well, it was really terrible when it happened at the time. But, if that didn't happen, then this wouldn't have happened. And I wouldn't have met this person and I wouldn't have got married and this wouldn't have. So I guess it was the best thing that could have happened to me. Well, if it is the best thing that could have happened to you 10 years from now, it's probably the best thing that could happen to you now. You just don't understand it. So I wanted to write about what happens when we cry out for help and it doesn't come the way we think it comes. And I had an experience with I run an orphanage in Haiti. I'm at every month, and have been there for the last 12 years. And my wife and I adopted one of the kids there who had a brain tumor, and she died after 2 years. And I was very angry at God and very angry at the world, and couldn't understand, how He could take a child. And so I kind of wrote the book from that perspective too, because it's only after a number of years have passed that I realized that losing our little girl wasn't a loss. Having her was the gift. We didn't lose a child. We were given a child. We were in our 50s. We never had children of our own, although we have 54 orphans we raised, but we never had children of our own. And suddenly we had this little girl in our lives. That was the answer to a prayer that we had made 15 years earlier. And suddenly it came true. So here in the Lifeboat are these 10 people who they survived this explosion. They're out in the water for 3 days. They're running out of food. They're running out of water. There's sharks. They're crying out for help in their own way. God, help us. Somebody help us. Somebody save us. And then suddenly they see this man floating in the water. They pull him into the boat, and he doesn't say anything. And one of the passengers says, well, thank the Lord we found you. And he says, I am the Lord. And instead of them saying, you're the Lord, thank God we're saved, they look at him and they see he's a skinny, average looking guy. And they go, no, you're not. And they just don't believe him. And they think he's just some guy who banged his head, because he gets hungry, he gets thirsty, he falls asleep a lot. And so he doesn't fit their idea of what help is supposed to look like. And so they ignore him, and they don't believe he is who he says he is. Just one or two of the characters think maybe. And so it's what happens in the Lifeboat as more and more bad things happen. Storms, running out of food, baking in the sun and all that. Do some of them change their mind about what help looks like, and actually believe this guy who basically says to them, I can save you, but only if everybody in the life raft believes I am who I say I am at the same time. And that becomes a very difficult challenge.
For
Yeah,
sure.
and well, yeah, it's an amazing story about your wife and your family's journey, and what you guys have gone through as well. But back to the book, throughout the novel, the reader follows the twists and turns of the story. And in the first few chapters, we think the outcome will be a certain way, only to get hit by another plot twist. And of course, without revealing too much, there is a pattern that becomes noticeable when the story goes from the newscast back to the sea. And then, of course, later we learn the whole truth. But why did you choose to tell the story that way?
Well, it is a thriller, and thrillers, you have to keep people on their toes. And so I found that the best way to keep people on their toes was to keep changing where the lens told the story. So sometimes you're in the boat, sometimes it's a year later, and you're with a police officer on an island in the Caribbean who finds the raft empty, floating up on shore, but inside is a notebook. And he's reading the notebook written by one of the passengers, and he's trying to figure out what happened and why is the raft empty, and it showed up on the shores a year later. And then there's the media reports that go along with it, because the boat was full of very rich, famous people. And so it was a big story when it exploded. And you sort of follow the media reports when they, maybe they think someone survived, and they ultimately determine nobody survived. Then they get wind of the fact that there's a life raft that's been found on an island, and they start going crazy about that and saying, what does this mean? Could someone have survived? So it keeps you jumping, because you never quite know, what little piece of information is going to come next. And if you've read the book, then you know that you really don't know, unless you've guessed it. You don't know exactly what really happened until the next to the last page. And that's the way you want to kind of write a thriller. You don't want everybody to know it by page 5. What's the point of reading? Exactly. But along the way, I get a chance to, while it's a thriller, I get a chance to put the questions that, if instead of me in this box, suddenly, I disappeared and up popped a figure who said, well, I'm the Lord, and I've been watching your program. I think you guys do a good job. I'm going to give you 60 seconds. Go ahead and ask me any questions you want. I'm pretty sure you would have some different questions for the Lord than you have for me. And I got to put those questions in the mouths of the characters who are on the life raft. Questions like, do you answer prayers? And the Lord character says, well, I answer every prayer, but sometimes the answer is no. Or, of course, the very big question, why do people have to die? And, that's a big part of the book where one of the characters breaks down crying and is talking about his wife. And he's, why did you take my wife? Why did my wife have to die? And the answer the Lord gives is, why is it that people on earth, when somebody dies, they always say, why did God take them? Maybe a better question would be, why did God give them to us? What did we do to deserve their love, their sweetness, the memories that they made with us? Didn't you have that with your wife? And he says, I had it every day. And the Lord character says, well, those memories are a gift, but their absence is not a punishment. I'm not here to be cruel to you. People don't die to ruin your world. This isn't the whole story here. Earth is just one part of the story. I know that when your loved ones die here on earth, you cry, but I can assure you where they are, they're not crying. And, I wrote that sentence and that page as much for me as I did for any reader, because that's what I sort of had to, and my wife sort of had to come to in our own minds about our little girl, that while we cry for her, and she's not with us anymore, she's not crying where she is. And there's some comfort to be taken from that. So along with all this thrilling stuff and, life rafts and boats and explosions and shark attacks and all the rest, there's all these moments where I get to, imagine how God would answer questions. And that was a challenge, but, an interesting, fun thing to try.
Yeah, no, you absolutely did a wonderful job. I'm sitting here reflecting on my life just while you're talking, and so I can't even really concentrate on the interview because I'm thinking about, man, if the Lord was here, what questions would I ask? And kind of like going back to a point that you said earlier, we pray for things, and when things don't happen, we think that our prayers weren't answered. And so I could think of many times in my life, in my career, that I missed out on an opportunity or something didn't happen the way I planned it. But I would have never got to this point where I'm at right now without the doors that shut or the opportunities that I missed because of whatever reason. And so I just like the way you were able to kind of apply that to a book, and get all of us really thinking, right? As we're going through this thriller ups and downs, but we're able to kind of pull that and kind of apply that to our own lives. So, and I kind of went into my next question is, what did you want your readers to take away from the novel itself as they read it?
Well, I wanted hopefully to provide a little comfort, first of all, for people who think that their prayers aren't being answered, or people who have lost somebody. There's also a moment in the book that kind of answers your question where one of the characters, I'm not really spoiling it to tell you this, but one of the characters decides to take his own life, and he wants to be with his wife in heaven. And in the middle of the night, he doesn't want to take any more food away from anybody else. He's really kind of being very selfless. And in the middle of the night, he kind of throws himself overboard. And when the other passengers wake up and they see he's not there, they get angry with the Lord character. And one of the men on the boat starts screaming at him. He says, "Did you know that was going to happen?" And he said, "Well, I know everything." And he said, "Well, then why? How come you permitted that to happen? If you were really God, you would have stopped it." And he says, "God starts things, man stops them." And that's one of the lessons I wanted people to think about, is that we blame God for a lot of our problems and a lot of our issues. But the truth is, most of them are of our own making, from war, which everybody was watching. This is, we make the wars, not God, to we make cigarettes, we make the drugs, we make the alcohol, we create the stress. I believe that God gave us a world that if we wanted to, we could make it a paradise. If we really all wanted to work together we could make it a beautiful world. Look at we could wipe out every disease that there is. Look at what we did with the vaccine in less than a year. We'll really put our mind to it, and we could feed every hungry person on the planet. We have all the resources, but we don't. And so we blame God, but maybe we should look internally a little bit more about what we could do. So, there are little lessons like that along the way that I hope people can pull something out of, whatever it kind of applies to their life.
Yeah, and the book really focuses on, that religious aspect and just trusting in God and just kind of, self-reflecting on how do I view my relationship with the Lord and how do I see God as my savior or as my guider when I am the kind of person who, wants things like this, like you mentioned, but then also wants to see the blessings in a particular way. And so even though some of the characters were anchored in a spiritual sense, the book uncovers the simple basic concept of just having faith and hope in something or someone greater than all of us. So how important is that idea in your own life?
It's critical. It's the backbone of your existence. There's going to be a moment where all your money, all your accomplishments, all your notoriety, all your achievements are going to mean nothing. You're going to be facing something that, the only partner you're going to probably have besides, your loved ones is going to be God, if you believe in a God. And, and at that moment, your faith is going to be tested. I'm sure that, I'm not telling people in the military anything that they haven't gone through 10 times more passionately and more directly than what I'm saying. There are moments where it's just you talking to God saying, get me out of this, get me through this. And, in those moments, you kind of find out how deep your faith really is. It's really easy to say, oh, thank God for all my blessings and my beautiful big house and my beautiful big car. And isn't it great how good God has been to me? Well, sure. It's easy to have faith when everything's going along just peachy. And it's when you suffer loss or when you suffer a challenge, when, we lost our little girl and I had to scream at the heavens and say, how is it possible that you could be a benevolent God, but you can't be benevolent to a 7-year-old who survived an earthquake when she was 3 days old, who became an orphan when she was 2, who had to get a brain tumor when she was 5 and was dead at 7. What kind of God does that? And that's where your faith is really tested. And, the truth is, I don't have a full answer to that question, but I'm glad that I have something to wrestle with. I'm glad that I have a belief that I can say, how could you do that? Why did you do that? I don't understand why you did that, as opposed to having nothing and just saying, well, the world is cruel. The world is meaningless. We're all worm food when we die. I don't find a lot of inspiration in that. So the answer to your question is it's critical. It's the underpinning of pretty much everything else that you do.
We thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and, just everything in your books and for sharing it in your books and, of course, sharing it with us today. We actually, of course, speaking of military, we have members in the military community from all over the world watching live with us. So the floor is yours. What message would you like to share with our nation's heroes today?
First of all, gratitude. I think in a world where everything gets so convoluted and everybody is ready to argue and pitch their own little mini wars over a comment, a tweet, a podcast, whatever, you all are no better. I've always found that people in the military, people who've served, particularly people who've been in combat, they understand how silly the problems that we get infatuated with here stateside, can be, and what we get caught up in and wrapped up in. And perspective, to me, perspective is the greatest gift that you can have in this world, next to love. And if you've got the perspective that serving gives you, where you say, no, this is what really matters, when your life is on the line, where your friends and your partners and your buddy's life is on the line, and you've got to make those decisions. And as long as you're not having to face that every single minute of every single day, you can handle anything else. All the stuff that we get wrapped up in, people who haven't served, it's foolish in many ways. It's small, and it can so easily be dealt with. And so I tip my hat to everybody who served. And as I say, my brother-in-law Ali, who's watching on this, he's the one who called me and said, dial back in after I got stuck on the Frozen. And I have such great admiration for him and all the decades that he put into service, and the relatives of my family who served in wars. And my father was in the service. And there's a moment in the 5 people you meet in heaven where the second person he meets in heaven, Eddie meets in heaven, is his old Army sergeant from the time that he was in World War II. And each person in heaven is there to teach Eddie a lesson. And the lesson that the Army sergeant is there to teach him is about sacrifice. And without going into the whole plot of it, what he says to him at the end before he leaves him is, sacrifice, you think sacrifice is that you lose something of your own, but what it really is you're passing something on to somebody else. And that's what service people do, with their service, sometimes with their lives. They give the gift of what they have to someone else. That's the ultimate kind of sacrifice, time or all the way to your life. So I thank you. I thank everybody who's watching. The minute I was asked to do this, I said, absolutely, 100%, just set it up. I consider it an honor to talk to any of the people in our armed services. And I thank everybody for paying attention to this and for reading my books. I hope they provide some diversion, entertainment, spirituality, or whatever during the long hours.
Well, Mitch, you're also getting an amazing reception on our live feed, and I'd like to share just a few of the comments with you. So Zia Mara said it was an interesting trailer, and in response, Franco says, wow, now I have to read that one now. Also, Julie Mitchell says, love this message. We don't know what the Lord will look like. Emily says she's loving this interview. And Peter says, veterans, thank you, Mitch.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me on. And anytime you want to chat again, I'm here. I'll try to get better internet service.
Hey, Mitch, I got a couple comments on my page as well that I want to read. My good friend, Gabriela Jaramillo, she's retired Master Sergeant now, love her to death. She says, love Mitch and his sports journalism, but love the books, all of them. And matter of fact, when we posted the promo for this interview, she posted her whole bookshelf, and it's got Mitch Albom all over the bookshelf. So you definitely are prevalent in Gabby's household. And she loves your charity work. She loves what you do for the world. So thank you for that. Angela Santos, who is my public affairs NCO, she says she loves Tuesdays with Maury and the story behind the book. So many lessons that and 5 people you meet in heaven helped me get through when my mom was battling cancer. So you're impacting people on a global scale, and we love you and appreciate you for everything you've done for the world. And so so for me, this whole interview has been kind of emotional. So I normally have like a low tear duct count. So but I feel like my allergies are kind of flaring up as we discuss this. And so now that you had people kind of crying, maybe watching this interview, and people definitely crying reading the novel, do you think you're gonna have people crying on the big screen with Stranger on the Lifeboat? Could there be a film in the works, or are there any other projects you're working on?
The truth is that this very computer that I just dialed in on, when I just dialed you, I'm in the middle of writing the screenplay for Stranger in the Lifeboat. They've already came after it for a movie deal, and we're in the process of putting it together. So, yeah, I think it would make an interesting movie. It's very cinematic. It takes place out in the ocean and everything like that. So, yeah, that's in the works. And, I've had films made of my books before. I have another film that's going to come out next year about a hockey player. So, yeah, I sometimes work in the in the area of film, but it's always from the perspective of story. I just like telling stories, and sometimes you tell them in books and sometimes you tell them in movies, but hopefully it won't be too long. There'll be a movie version of it. I wouldn't say, well, I'll just wait till the movie comes out and not read the book. I would definitely read the book, because movies, A, I want everybody to read the book, but B, movies can take a long time, even when they look like they're going fast. So I don't want anybody to get too old before the movie comes out. But thank you for asking about it. And yeah, I'm literally, when the screen goes off, it goes back to the screenplay. That's what I was working on before you called. So.
Oh, that's awesome.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, awesome. I always like to read the book before watching the movie and point out all the differences anyway. So that's good. Good suggestion. But you also host the Tuesday People podcast. It sounds like you've recorded over 100 episodes, and some of the recent ones actually give insight to the lessons in the Stranger in the Lifeboat. Can you tell us more about the show and what fans can expect?
Yeah, well, I do two podcasts. One is the Sports Reporters, which is a show that I used to do on ESPN on Sunday mornings. Myself, Mike Lupica, and Bob Ryan, the three who were on that show the most, still do it twice a week as a podcast on Mondays and Thursdays. So Monday we'll do the Super Bowl. And the Tuesday People podcast, we started a couple of years ago because I realized I have all these tapes of myself talking to Maury, which I never had any real way to sort of share with anybody, because podcasts didn't exist until about 10 years ago, 12 years ago. And so I thought, well, now that the podcast world exists and the medium exists, I could do a show once a week on Tuesdays, which is when we do it, and take some of these tapes and play the conversations that Maury and I had and talk about some of the lessons, just like we did. Only already we've had well over 100 shows, so that's a lot more Tuesdays than I got with Maury, but there's a lot there. And so I shared the tapes and I share some of the lessons, and you can get either one of those anywhere you get podcasts, Apple, Stitcher, Spotify, Pandora, all those places. And yeah, it's interesting way to talk to people. I prefer this. I like, interaction, but podcasts are cool as well. You record them and you just watch people listen to them.
Yeah, so before we say goodbye, can you remind our viewers where they can go to follow you, subscribe to both of your podcasts, and keep up with all things Mitch Albom?
Pretty simple. Like a lot of people, I have a basic website, mitchalbom.com, which has all of that. There it is. And my charity stuff, which I'd appreciate people actually checking more than me. I run an orphanage in Haiti that I'm at every month, and without fail. And it's been 12 years now, and I'll be there for the rest of my life. We have 54 orphans that we raise there, who are beautiful kids, and these are kids who have been abandoned, left out to die in the woods, dropped off at a malnutrition center, and nobody comes back for them for 2 years. The most horrific kind of early stories. Many of them come to us without a name, without a birth certificate. We don't even know how old they are, but we bring them in and they live with us. We don't adopt anybody out. They stay their whole time. They get educated, 4 hours in English, 4 hours in French every day. My sister runs the school program, and it's so good that we now have 8 of our kids in universities here in the States, and every one of them will get a college scholarship if they can make it. And so far they've all made it. And one of them is about to go to medical school. And these are kids who in many cases wouldn't even be alive. And that is havefaithhaiti.org. You can find out about our orphanage. If you want to volunteer or come down and work with us. We've actually had some people from the military who have, after they've finished their service, have come down and spent time with us down there. And I'm very proud of those kids, and I'm proud of the city I live in, which is Detroit. And I do work there at saydetroit.org, which is the organization that I run there for charity. So thanks for giving me the chance to shout all that out. And hopefully we'll be hearing from some people.
Of course, that is amazing work that you're doing. Thank you for everything that you do for those children, giving them those opportunities. As a reminder to everybody else, we do want to remind everybody that authorized shoppers can purchase The Stranger in the Lifeboat tax-free at shopmyexchange.com or in select exchange stores.
And so, also for our Q Chat viewers, I want to remind you that this episode is available on YouTube and Spotify. You can rewatch with your friends or catch up on past episodes. Also, be sure to join us February 17th as we welcome soap star and Hallmark movie actress Allison Sweeney at 11 a.m. Central Standard Time and actor Channing Tatum at 1:15 p.m. Central Standard Time. So, Mitch, kind of the cool thing about this show is I get a chance to talk to people that we watch on TV, or I'm like, and I'm in a very very unique position here in the military where I get the chance to talk to people that I see on TV, or actors, or athletes, or military leaders, and you see them in one way from your TV screen, but you don't know what they're doing behind the scenes. And to be able to get to know you, the cool thing is it seems like all the bad stuff in the world gets highlighted more than all the great stuff that people are doing. And so I enjoy having these conversations and getting to know people as human beings, and also kind of what they're doing for the world, because there's so many great people out there doing so many great things for the world that don't necessarily get a platform or don't get the attention because negativity is what kind of sells or what people pay attention to. But and I just want to thank you for giving us an hour of your time, talk to our team and some perspectives that people that never got out of the they can go into your book and the world from different lenses. And I think what I've been kind of planning in my mind, had these conversations.
That was great. Well, it's a real pleasure. I really enjoyed talking with all of you. While you were talking, I pulled up. Here's our kids. That's some of them.
That's awesome.
Just some of them, but it's a pretty happy family, and there's a lot of little ones hiding there down at the bottom. But we take in new kids all the time, and that's where my heart is most of the time. And appreciate you giving me a chance to talk about it.
I love that.
Absolutely, man. That's amazing. And like I said, keep doing the great work that you're doing for the world. And you got supporters here at the Exchange. We love you, and we'll continue to support you in the future. Having that said, if you don't mind hanging on with us after the live, I just want to kind of say some formal goodbyes. But we appreciate your time, and we wish you all the best in your future endeavors. And Chief Chat out.